Good evening, my beautiful people. I go by the name Shota de Olusegun. This is the genuine solution of Riemann hypothesis by formula of everything as related to logarithm and exponential. Albert Einstein discovered the reason we could not have a global now simply because of relativity of simultaneity. One thing about relativity is that it will create a central point to which the two parties could, gravitate or repel. And as a result of that, there is no possibility to actually get any object at its point of instantiation. So now, I discovered this problem by using time energy wave model and applying formula of everything. So we realize that we get genuine contact at complex level to have this quantum entanglement, and then at classical level there is this suspension. So by relativity, we usually have genuine contact at one side while the other part is suspended. So now to solve this problem, information or anything that must actually travel from that point to the other point must travel instantly, which is the default nature of time. So now I want you to look at this chart. We have the blue curvature to be y equal to e to the power of x, and then we have y equal to log x base e, which is the curvature of the red. So can we really say that these two curvatures are the same? So now we're going to see and capture the asymmetric nature of logarithm relative to exponential. How can we do that? First of all, we know that if we have 50 and 100 grams of the soft salt, after some sips of the two, we will perceive the taste of 100 grams as being much more than twice as salty as that of the 50 grams. So with that, we get to know that we have this asymmetric taste of the two. So even though the 100 grams is expected to be 2 times salty in comparison to that 50 gram, we see that that is not what we actually get. So now let's see how we can capture this asymmetric phenomenon. So if we have 3 raised to power 2 as our exponential, 3 times 3 will give us 9, and we can write that in logarithm form as log 9 base 3 equal to 2. So now if we now flip this exponential such that we have 2 raised to power 3, 2 times 2 times 2 will give us 8. The logarithm form will be 8 base 2 equal to 3. So with that, we can get to see by relativity that the second result is being decayed by a worth of 1 relative to the initial result. And with that, we can get to see that asymmetric nature. But how can we do it such that we retain the result of 9 for that flipped version of the exponential? The way we can do that is to actually maintain that with the logarithm. So if we have 2 raised to power 3, 2 times 2 times 2 will give us 8. Now when we are writing the logarithm form, it will now be log 9 base 2 equal to 3.1699. So approximately it will be 3.2. Now we can get to see that when we are trying to maintain the 9, then the logarithm has become transcendental. And this is so essential because the movement from substrate dimension to higher dimension is what will give us the complex system, and that is what we want to duly explore here. So now you see that when we specify 1 for the s value of zeta function, then we have its results to be infinity. And so we're going to explore this deeply because having one part to be having the result to be infinity relative to the 1 is actually pointing to the fact that we have genuine contact at one side where we have 1, while we now have suspension at the other side. Don't forget that odd numbers are infinities, be it 2n plus 1 or 2n plus, minus 1, we have it to be infinity, but the 2n minus 1 as a proper subset of 2n plus 1 can actually give us a genuine or finite instantiation, but then by definition it is still infinity. So we then realize that primes they are jumping powers from low energy state to high energy state. As well, we can call them jumping powers from substrate dimension to higher dimension. Now, when you look at this prime counting function, with that we have these jagged patterns, and from there we can get to see how primes could give us these jumping powers. But if you now consider long duration of time, and so if we're to explore the second chart as we have it here, we can then see that the jagged patterns are being smoothed out based on that vastness of time. And if we have such smoothness as we have it, we can actually liken that to couples of zeros. And when you look at this extreme right side here, you can see that right from the topmost we have this free fall of the zeros, and so the blue zeros that we have, they are the real zeros, and you can see that they actually go beyond the limit of the real axis, and that is making it to be transcendental so that it can get connected to the higher dimension to give us that complex system. And then we have red zeros. These are the non-trivial zeros of Riemann hypothesis. These zeros are being situated at 0.5 on real axis, and they are more or less like the mirrored versions. They are more or less like the mirrored versions of the real zeros. So now, non-trivial zeros, they are more or less like prime-encoded zeros. They are prime-encoded zeros that are pointing to real object through the central 0 point into the higher dimension, which is complex system. So now let's look at application of formula of everything and how that has solved the problem for us. So now when we apply formula of everything using the mass worth of electron, then when you look at the first phase results, then we're going to have our answer to be 2,277,250,000 kilograms, which is the classical mass worth. That is the classical mass worth of electron. But then if we now put the classical mass value inside the formula, we're going to have 5.7 times 10 raised to power 48. And when we'll expand that in standard form, we're going to have the base worth of the electron being suspended at 32nd position, which is somehow similar to the topmost where we have the blue zero before falling down. So now we can manually annihilate the suspended zeros, only the suspended zeros, and to annihilate we have it to be 9,109 over 10 raised to power 32. So when we'll expand the fraction, and then we're going to have the answer to be 9.109 times 10 raised to minus 32 kilogram. Now this is the decayed worth to real electron, and that is being shifted to 0.5 region on real axis. So we have this being truncated within the substrate dimension, and if we have multiple of these, we can get to real electron, because this value will be half worth of the real electron. So now the manual annihilation of the suspended zero will give us this free fall of zeros, and so the moment it gets connected to the positron of higher dimension that will be instantly converted to positron, then we're going to have it being truncated and being shifted to these red zeros. And so second phase result, we can actually put this decayed result inside the formula of everything, and we will be able to track how the decayed watt at the power, which is negative, which is negation of 1, how that will actually affect the classical watt. And so with that, we have seen that almost about 2 billion worth of classical mass watt is being decayed, because our result is now 277,725,000 kilogram with some couples, with some other zeros. And so the zeros after the dot are so insignificant, we can get rid of that. If we put this value inside the formula of everything, the answer that we get will be 6.9 times 10 raised to power 47. When we'll expand that in standard form, then we see that the suspension is now at 31st. And so the base worth of electron is being decayed to 11109. So to manually annihilate that, we have it to be 11109 over 10 raised to power 31. So when we'll expand the fraction, we're going to have our answer to be 1.1009 times 10 raised to power minus 31 kilogram. Now, what we have right here, the base worth is being decayed to 1.1, which is synonymous to the fact that when the S value of zeta function is greater than 1, we then have convergence. Now, if we'll explore this diagram, we have suspension right inside the black hole. The result that we got is actually at that suspension, and you could see that the power initially moved backward and then moved forward. So we have quasar-like signal right at the core singularity of the black hole. So that is how formula of everything has solved the mystery of Riemann hypothesis. The decayed worth of electron to the real electron is shifted by 0.5 on real axis. And so when we now get the totality of the zeros, which is 32nd, if we take the digital root, it will give us 5, which is a prime. And then when we now get the multiple of that, which will be 32 plus 32, which will give us 64. Then 64, 6 plus 4 will give us 10. And then 1 plus 0 will give us 1. So now we can get to see that movement from 1, we can get to see that movement from 1 to 10. Then at the center we have the 5. Definitely those 32 zeros, 10 to the 32 zeros, they are actually at 0.5 on real axis. And then we can get to see that the totality of the electron can be represented as 1. The totality of the electron can be represented as 1, but then you can see that we also have 10, which is even number, and it's an indication that we have transcendental phenomena. So thank you, God bless you.